The power hidden in emotional distance. Have you ever noticed that the person who speaks the least is the one everyone tries to understand? The one who doesn't chase, doesn't explain, doesn't try to please, somehow becomes the center of every room, the one whose absence speaks louder than most people's presence. It's not a coincidence. It's not magic. It's power, silent power. Because in a world where everyone is screaming to be heard, the one who refuses to beg for attention becomes the one worth watching. That is the paradox most people never learn. The more detached you are from the need to be liked, the more magnetic you become. The moment you stop seeking validation, the game shifts. You're no longer one of the many competing for approval. You become the one who defines what's worth approving. This isn't apathy. This isn't about shutting down or pretending not to care. This is a conscious discipline, a psychological edge, a quiet refusal to hand over your emotional life to people who haven't earned access to it. And that refusal, it creates mystery. Mystery creates tension. Tension creates desire. What's freely given is discarded. What's hard to read becomes a puzzle. And the human mind cannot resist solving a puzzle. This is why detachment, real strategic detachment, is so powerful. Because it turns your silence into gravity. It draws people in. It forces them to wonder, to chase, to question their own value in the absence of your response. And that's the secret. The man who doesn't need to be chosen becomes the one who is. So if you're tired of being overlooked, manipulated, or used, this isn't about becoming colder. This is about becoming sovereign. Because in the psychology of power, detachment isn't distance. It's dominance. There is a kind of man who doesn't need to speak often, because his presence already shifts the atmosphere. He walks into a room without announcing himself, yet all eyes eventually find him. Not because he demands attention, but because he withholds it. While others are busy explaining, justifying oversharing, he watches, calm, unmoved. And in that stillness, he becomes unforgettable. This is the first truth of power. Attention flows to the one who doesn't need it. Detachment. Real detachment is not apathy. It is presence without performance. It's the quiet decision to stop proving your worth and start observing who truly sees it. And in that moment, the power dynamic reverses. You are no longer chasing validation. You are choosing who is worthy of yours. Most people don't understand this because they've been trained their whole lives to seek permission, to be seen, to be liked, to be chosen. But the man who no longer needs to be chosen becomes the one they must choose. Because what we cannot fully understand, we begin to desire. What we cannot predict, we begin to obsess over. Detachment is the engine of that mystery. And mystery is not emptiness. It is depth unspoken. Have you ever watched someone unravel just because you didn't react the way they expected? That's the power of emotional restraint. When you stop feeding people your reactions, they are forced to confront their own insecurity. And here's the truth. The most irresistible man is not the one who gives everything, but the one who holds something back. The man who doesn't explain his silence, who doesn't fill every gap with comfort, becomes a mirror, and the more they stare into him, the more they see themselves, their hopes, their fears, their doubts. That's where fascination begins. So many ruin their value by giving too much too soon to those who haven't earned it. Detachment restores that value. It tells the world, I am not yours by default. If you want me, earn me. If you want to know me, prove you can be trusted. And in doing so, you become what few people ever become. You become rare. And in the psychology of desire, there is nothing more irresistible than that which is rare and just out of reach. The world doesn't see you as you are, it sees you as the role it gave you. Maybe you were cast as the helper, the nice one, the people pleaser, the one who always explains, always apologizes, always tries to make things okay. Or perhaps they made you the rebel, the difficult one, the black sheep, the one they expect to explode on cue so they can say, see, he's unstable. You didn't choose these roles, they were handed to you like a script. And like most people, You played your part, because no one told you that you could walk off the stage entirely. Every social game is built on this silent theater. Everyone has their cue, their assigned emotion, their expected reaction. But detachment is ripping the script in half and walking off set. It is the refusal to be typecast, because the moment they can predict your reaction, they can control you. If they know you'll argue, when insulted, flatter when praised, bend when guilted, then they don't need to respect you. They only need to push the right button. And most people, they don't just show you where their buttons are, they paint them in neon and leave the power on. But the detached man is unreadable. He breaks their frame by refusing to react on cue. And this unsettles them because your silence rewrites the story. Suddenly their insult falls flat. Their manipulation doesn't land. Their praise feels hollow. And in that discomfort they begin to spiral, not because you hurt them, but because you didn't give them what they expected. Emotionally detached does not mean emotionally dead. It means no longer being emotionally programmable. It's a declaration: you do not get to assign me a role in your drama. I am not your puppet. I am not your fixer. I am not your enemy, or your trophy, or your punching bag. I am sovereign. And yes, they will hate this. They'll call you arrogant, selfish, cold. They'll try to provoke you because the unprovoked man is terrifying. He forces others to confront the fact that their manipulation has no power here anymore. Detachment becomes the first act of self-respect, and the final blow to every game they used to win. Detachment is not about turning to stone. It is not the absence of emotion, it is the architecture of strength. A man who is detached isn't hollow inside. He's fortified. Because in a world where attention is sold cheap and emotions are given away like samples at a supermarket, the man who guards his inner world becomes sacred, untouchable. And that's exactly what you must become: a fortress. Most people are ruins, and they don't even know it. Cracked open by every insult, collapsed by every slight, exposed to the elements of gossip, approval, rejection. Their emotions are public property. Their boundaries are suggestions. They open their gates for every visitor hoping to be loved, liked, understood. And in that desperation, they let the world ransack them. But the man who becomes a fortress does not do this. He does not open the gates just because someone knocks. He does not give explanation just because someone demands it. He does not hand over his thoughts, his vulnerabilities, his soul, because he knows they are currency. And power is lost the moment you spend that currency on the unworthy. You must decide: are you a fortress or a ruin? A fortress is not cruel. It is discerning. It is not bitter. It is strategic. It does not deny connection. It demands that connection be earned. Every word, every look, every piece of your attention is valuable. And once you treat it that way, so will others. Have you ever noticed how the man who says little is listened to more? How the person who doesn't rush to respond is seen as wise? It's not because he knows everything. It's because he doesn't waste his energy proving himself. His restraint creates weight. His silence creates gravity. People lean in because he doesn't lean out. That's not coldness. That's control. Let others waste themselves trying to be understood by everyone. Let them offer apologies to those who never valued them. You are building something different. You are constructing walls not to keep love out, but to keep self-respect in. You're choosing to become rare, unreadable, secure. A man like that doesn't need to raise his voice. His silence echoes louder than noise. His presence speaks for itself. And in a world full of ruins begging to be rebuilt, the fortress becomes unforgettable. There's something deeply unsettling about a person you can't read. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know if they like you, if they approve of you, if they're judging you, or if they simply don't care. And it's exactly that uncertainty that hooks you. It pulls you and traps you in your own need for clarity and turns your desire for control into quiet desperation. That's the weapon of detachment. It turns your silence into their obsession. Most people live to be understood. Every move they make is a signal, a request, a desperate plea. Please notice me. Please accept me. Please don't misinterpret me. But the man who can walk through life without explaining himself becomes untouchable. When you don't explain your boundaries, they seem stronger. When you don't justify your silence, it feels louder. And when you stop reacting to their tactics, their power dissolves right in front of them. People try to control what they can predict. If they know you'll laugh when they flatter you, apologize, when they guilt you, explode, when they push you, they don't respect you. They use you. But when they can't anticipate your next move, when they don't know what you'll say, or if you'll say anything at all, they become cautious, respectful, even afraid. That's the psychological reversal. The minute you stop making yourself readable, you make yourself unplayable. And here's the uncomfortable truth: what people can't understand, they begin to project onto. They fill the silence you create with their own fears, fantasies, and insecurities. Suddenly, you're not just a person anymore, you're a symbol. You become the blank page where they write their deepest need for validation. And yet, you give them nothing. No reassurance, no clarification, no emotional breadcrumbs to follow, just your presence measured, still watchful. That's how power moves. Quiet, controlled, unbothered. It doesn't mean you're heartless. It means your emotions are too sacred to be handed out like charity. It means you've learned the moment they can predict you, they can replace you. But the unreadable man, the man who says little and watches much, cannot be replaced. He becomes the standard. So let them guess. Let them wonder what you think, what you feel, what you'll do next. Because in that space of mystery, they give you what they'd never offer freely to anyone else: their attention, their respect, their fear. And that is control. There is no faster way to lose value than to make yourself emotionally cheap. Every time you over-explain, over-apologize, overshare, you shrink. And they feel it. You become small in their eyes, not because you are weak, but because you give your power away without asking anything in return. You hand out your emotions like coupons, hoping someone will finally treat them as currency. But they never do. Why would they? You've already shown them your silence is for sale, your presence is guaranteed, and your dignity is negotiable. The truth is hard but necessary. No one values what they don't have to earn. We see it in relationships that start with fireworks but end in disrespect. In friendships where loyalty is assumed, not proven. In people who run to us only when we're easy to access and disappear when we're not. The pattern is clear. What's always available is taken for granted. What's rare is protected. And the rarest thing in the modern world is a man who doesn't need to explain himself. A man like that walks in truth, not performance. He doesn't fill awkward silences with nervous chatter. He doesn't spill his dreams to people who haven't shown loyalty. He doesn't rush to explain his boundaries because he knows truth doesn't need a defense. When he says no, he means it. When he walks away, it's not a threat, it's a declaration. And when someone accuses him of being distant, arrogant, or too private, he doesn't argue. He lets them talk. Because the more they explain him, the more they expose themselves. That's where the sovereign man stands above the emotional chaos, above the need to be understood, above the pressure to constantly perform his personality for the comfort of others. He understands this simple but devastating truth: your worth isn't proven by how well you explain it. It's proven by how well you guard it. So stop giving people your soul on a silver platter. Stop trying to be the good one, the easy one, the reliable one who's always there, always agreeable, always available. Because you're not a service. You're not a convenience. You are a force, a standard, a gate that only opens for the worthy. And the man who finally learns to stop explaining himself becomes the man others have no choice but to explain. Silence is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is the most misunderstood form of power in the modern world. In a culture addicted to constant reaction, the one who remains still becomes godlike. We live in an age where everyone has something to say immediately, impulsively, without thinking. But it is the man who can withhold his words, his feelings, his attention, who commands the room without saying a single word. Let others fill the air with noise. Let them explain, defend, argue, justify. You stay silent. Because every time you choose stillness over reaction, you steal control from the room. You shift the weight. Your silence becomes the loudest thing in the conversation. And that's what terrifies them. Not that you might explode, but that you won't. That you won't feed their drama. That you won't play your role. That you won't hand them a single ounce of power through your response. Have you ever watched someone unravel because you didn't react? Because you didn't chase their accusation with an apology, because you didn't take the bait? That's what silence does. It exposes people. The manipulative grow louder. The insecure begin projecting. The self-absorbed panic. All because you didn't give them what they expected, you gave them nothing. And that nothing is everything. When you withdraw your attention, they are forced to face their own emptiness. When you stop justifying your boundaries, they realize they can no longer negotiate with your dignity. When you stop defending yourself, they are left confronting themselves, and most people can't stomach what they see. But here's the deeper truth. Silence isn't just a weapon. It's a filter. It shows you who's real and who only stayed because you kept performing for their comfort. The moment you stop, the moment you hold back, the truth reveals itself. And yes, some will leave. Let them. Let them walk away confused, angry, calling you cold or selfish. Because those who leave when you stop giving endlessly were never with you. They were with the version of you that begged to be enough. So let your silence speak now. Let it echo louder than 1,000 explanations. Let it become the standard that separates the worthy from the wasteful. Because when your silence has weight, your presence becomes priceless. We've been taught a lie that giving more makes you more lovable, that revealing everything builds trust, that constant reassurance keeps people close. But the truth is, colder, sharper, and far more powerful, what is always available is rarely valued. What is earned is protected. And the most seductive force in any relationship, romantic, professional, or personal, is restraint. Desire does not live in the known. It lives in the withheld. It grows in the spaces between certainty. The most irresistible people are not the loudest, the kindest, or even the most beautiful. They are the ones you can't fully figure out. The ones who give just enough to spark your curiosity, but never enough to be owned. That's why the detached man never chases. He doesn't need to. His value is in his selectiveness. He knows that giving too much too soon too easily only cheapens what's sacred. It sends a message: you didn't need to earn me. I'm already yours. And that message, no matter how well intended, kills the very tension that desire depends on. The truth is, most people suffocate their own relationships. They text too often. They overshare. They explain every emotion, every silence, every boundary. In their effort to connect, they erase the very mystery that made them attractive in the first place. And slowly, quietly, they become forgettable. Because they gave everything before the other person even knew how to value it. But not you. Not anymore. The detached man withholds not to punish, but to preserve. He doesn't flood someone with affection to win them over. He doesn't explain his silence to soothe their anxiety. He lets his absence do what his presence cannot reveal: their hunger. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You are no longer for sale to the highest bidder of attention. You are no longer available by default. If they want you, they must rise. They must earn access. And in that pursuit, respect is born. Because what's earned is cherished, and what's rare is remembered. So never beg to be desired. Never over-deliver to feel worthy. Hold yourself back not out of fear, but out of knowledge that true connection must be built, not begged for. Because the man who doesn't chase becomes the one they can't stop chasing. In war, in business, in love, those who act fast lose leverage. Those who act last win the room. The man who cannot wait exposes his weakness. The one who rushes to fix things, to calm tensions, to seal the deal, hands over his position before the game even begins. You see it everywhere. In the lover who apologizes too soon. in the negotiator who accepts the first offer, in the friend who explains his boundaries before anyone challenges them. They think they're being kind. They think they're keeping peace. But what they're really doing is bleeding power. Detachment is not indifference. It is deliberate distance. It's the willingness to wait, to pause, to observe while others reveal their intentions. It's understanding that not every conflict needs your energy. Not every request deserves a yes, and not every silence must be filled. Detachment is the discipline to hold even when your emotions beg you to act. Have you ever seen someone grow desperate the moment you stopped reacting? Their voice rises, their urgency grows, their tactics escalate. Why? Because your stillness becomes a mirror, and it reflects their need, not yours. You gain power by refusing to meet their pace. You stay grounded while they burn themselves out. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. He warned the prince who craves love more than respect becomes a slave to opinion. But the prince who is willing to be feared, who can walk away, who does not need affection to feel whole, becomes untouchable. In politics, that's leadership. In love, that's irresistible. Detachment allows you to be both feared and desired, not because you're cruel, but because you're controlled. Your time, your attention, your emotions are not freely given. They are earned. And in that rarity, people rise. They bring their best. They come correct. When you're detached, you don't respond to pressure. You observe it. You let them show their cards while you hold yours close. You don't explode in conflict. You collect data, you listen, you wait. And when the time is right, you make one move. Clean, final, unforgettable. This is how power moves. Not loudly, not desperately, but strategically. And the man who has mastered strategic detachment never begs, never explains, never chases. He waits. And because of that, he always wins. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in pieces. In the apology you gave for a boundary you had every right to set. In the silence you broke just to make someone else comfortable. In the love you poured into someone who gave you breadcrumbs in return. These aren't just moments, they're tiny betrayals. Not to others, but to yourself. And most people are living with the weight of those betrayals, smiling on the surface but exhausted underneath. Tired not because life is too hard, but because they've made themselves too easy to guilt, too easy to access, too easy to explain. Detachment is how you end that cycle. It is the choice to stop apologizing for needing space, the decision to stop over-explaining your decisions to people who only question them out of entitlement. It's the act of stepping back from the noise and finally saying, I don't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. The reason most people feel burnt out isn't because they're too emotional. It's because they've invested deeply in people and situations that never deserved their energy. They've explained their worth to those who were never listening. They've defended their soul to people who only wanted ammunition. And every time they do it, they shrink. Not visibly, quietly, internally. But the man who chooses detachment, he begins to rebuild. He becomes careful with his words, not out of fear, but out of respect for himself. He doesn't rush to fix misunderstandings because he knows the truth doesn't beg to be believed. He learns that walking away without a speech is more powerful than staying and bleeding for clarity that no one values. And yes, it will be painful. You will lose people. People who were only in your life because you kept shrinking for their comfort. People who needed you emotional, reactive, available so they could stay in control. But once you stop performing that version of yourself, they disappear. Let them. Because the man who betrays himself for peace never knows peace. And the man who finally detaches, who reclaims the right to be quiet, still selective, he doesn't just regain his power. He becomes whole again. And wholeness is more seductive than any apology ever will be. You will be misunderstood. Not because you are wrong, but because you stopped explaining yourself to people who were never listening. Because you stopped dressing your truth in politeness. Because you stopped shrinking your standards to avoid their discomfort. And that's when the backlash begins, not from enemies, but from the ones who only loved the version of you they could control. This is the final test of detachment. Can you let them misunderstand you and still remain still? Because most people crack right here. The silence becomes unbearable. The distance becomes guilt. The fear of being labeled cold, arrogant, selfish starts clawing at their chest. So they break. They reach back out. They soften the boundary. They explain what needed no explanation. And in that moment, they trade their sovereignty for approval and call it love. But the man who is truly detached does something else entirely. He lets them talk. He lets them spin their narrative. He lets them walk away, take their misinterpretation with them, and close the door behind themselves. Not because he's emotionless, but because he finally knows if being respected costs being misunderstood, so be it. If protecting your peace means losing shallow connections, let them go. If refusing to perform means some people call you cold, let them freeze. You don't owe the world your constant accessibility. You don't owe everyone an explanation. You owe yourself clarity. You owe yourself dignity. And if keeping your center means losing those who only stayed for your flexibility, then what you lost wasn't loyalty. It was manipulation dressed as acceptance. Let them leave confused. Let them call you what they need to so they can justify their own discomfort. That discomfort is theirs to hold, not yours to soothe. Because the more detached you become, the more clearly you see. And when you stop giving yourself away to be understood, you finally understand yourself. That is the power. That is the line you cross and never return from. Let them misunderstand you. Let them misjudge you. Let them mourn the version of you who bent, broke, and explained everything away, because that version is dead, and in its place stands something rarer, something unshakable, something sovereign. Here's the paradox: they don't want you to learn. The less you need others, the more they need you. The less you reveal, the more they want to know. The less you chase, the more they feel pulled toward your silence. It's not manipulation. It's human psychology. Scarcity creates value. And in a world where everyone is selling themselves for attention, the man who withholds becomes irresistible. Think about it. How often have you longed for someone not because they gave you everything, but because they didn't? Because they left space for you to wonder, to reach, to question. That space, that tension, is what fuels obsession and detachment. Real detachment doesn't just create space, it controls it. People are starving for authenticity, yet addicted to validation. They chase what they can't define. They fall in love with what feels just out of reach. When you stop giving your emotions away like samples, when you stop bleeding for every opinion in the room, your presence becomes a kind of mystery, a magnet. They begin to watch you more closely, study your silences, search for meaning in your restraint. And the moment you become unreadable, you become unforgettable. But make no mistake, this isn't about playing games. It's about no longer participating in theirs. You're not withdrawing to punish. You're withholding to protect. Because you've learned the cost of emotional overexposure. You've seen how quickly love turns into entitlement when it's given too easily. You felt the burn of being available to those who never deserved your vulnerability. Now you become rare, and what's rare becomes sacred. The man who holds back not from fear but from wisdom doesn't have to demand respect. He commands it. He becomes the standard by which others measure their access. And every second of your silence, every inch of your distance says, what words never could, I am not here to entertain your expectations. I am here to protect my energy. Let them come to you. Let them try to earn what used to be free. Because once you've tasted the power of restraint, you'll never beg again. And once they've felt the weight of your absence, they'll never forget the cost of taking your presence for granted. Detachment is not built when life is easy. It's not forged in peace applause or comfort. No detachment is born in the storm. It's built in the moments you're misunderstood, ignored, rejected, and still refuse to explain yourself. It's hammered into you each time you choose silence over defense, composure, over reaction, and solitude over begging for belonging. Most people can't stomach that kind of silence. The weight of being misunderstood breaks them. The fear of not being liked bends them. So they return to old patterns, performing for approval, softening their standards, trading self-respect for temporary closeness. But every time they do, they teach the world, you don't have to value me. I'll do the work for you, not you. You are building something rarer. You are training yourself to stay still while others try to provoke. You are learning to say nothing while they accuse, to hold your boundaries without decorating them with apologies. You are choosing to be feared for your silence rather than loved for your surrender, because you finally understand love without respect is manipulation, and peace that costs your dignity is war in disguise. Detachment demands that you become someone most people can't manipulate. It demands you grow strong enough to hear their accusations and remain unmoved. That you walk away from those who want access without accountability. That you master the art of discomfort, of letting others sit with their disappointment while you protect your soul. They will test you with silence, with guilt, with pressure. They'll bait you to explain to Ben to prove you're still who you used to be, the easy version. But you won't take the bait, because you felt what it's like to betray yourself, and that wound cuts deeper than any insult ever could. So now you choose discipline over validation, distance over desperation, stillness over submission. Not because you don't feel, but because your feelings no longer run the show. And that's what makes you untouchable. Not because you don't bleed, but because you no longer bleed for the unworthy. Detachment is no longer a defense. It is a decision. A daily commitment to never again abandon yourself in order to keep someone else comfortable. And the man who can hold that line becomes the man no one can move. There comes a point when you no longer move to be seen, no longer speak to be understood, no longer perform to be liked. You move because it's time. You speak because it matters. And you remain silent because not everyone deserves access to your truth. This is sovereignty, not control over others, but full command over yourself. And in a world that demands your obedience, your urgency, your emotional availability, there is nothing more dangerous than a man who refuses to be owned. This is why detachment, when done right, becomes irresistible. Not because it makes you cold, but because it makes you clear. The fog of need, of insecurity, of over-explaining is gone. And in its place stands a presence, solid, grounded, rare. You no longer chase approval because you've buried the boy inside you who once begged to be enough. You no longer bleed for validation because you've learned that the world doesn't value what comes too cheap. And you no longer fear solitude because you've come to know the man who stands with you in the silence yourself. That's what makes you magnetic. It's not charisma. It's not charm. It's the quiet tension of someone who does not flinch, does not beg, and does not bend for shallow acceptance. You become the one who decides who enters and who doesn't, who earns access and who gets left outside. You set the terms, and those who can't meet them, fade. Let them. You are no longer building a life to impress the weak. You are constructing a kingdom that requires strength to enter. And in this kingdom, your time is sacred. Your presence is earned. Your emotions are no longer currency to be traded for attention, but weapons held in reserve, sharpened by silence, released only by choice. This is the end of the old you, the one who explained too much, gave too fast, stayed too long. And this is the beginning of the sovereign. So don't apologize for becoming untouchable. Don't fear the loneliness that comes when you level up. Because when you become the man who needs nothing, you become the one no one can ignore. Not because you ask for power, but because you are power. In a world that constantly demands your reaction, your explanation, your emotional availability, detachment isn't weakness, it's survival. The real lesson here is this: you don't owe your energy to everyone who asks for it. Your silence is not empty, it's strategic. Your boundaries are not cruelty, they are clarity. The moment you stop chasing validation, the world starts responding to your gravity. You're not here to perform for acceptance. You're not here to justify your existence to people who only love versions of you they can manipulate. The more you explain yourself, the more ammunition you give. But the moment you choose stillness over reaction, observation over explanation, sovereignty over emotional servitude, that's when your life begins to change. Start protecting your attention like it's gold, because it is. Make people earn access to your time, your thoughts, your heart. The right ones will rise, the wrong ones will resent you and walk away. Let them. Because when you stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable, you reclaim the deepest form of self-respect. You don't need to be louder to be heard. You need to be more selective about who hears you. So ask yourself right now, where are you leaking power? Who have you allowed to take your peace without earning it? What parts of yourself have you sold cheap, hoping for acceptance? It's time to raise your price. Start today. And if this message spoke to you, if something deep inside you felt seen, don't just scroll past. Tap like, hit subscribe, leave a comment. I choose clarity. Share this with someone who needs to reclaim their peace, because in a world full of noise, becoming grounded is revolutionary.